This is the 22nd meeting of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics. We are resuming the study today with regards to the questions of conflict of interest in lobbying in relation to the pandemic spending. I would like to remind members and witnesses that today's meeting will be available through the House of Commons website and will be webcast. This afternoon, our first witness is Sophia Marquez. Ms. Marquez was a former staff member, government and stakeholder relations with regards to We Charity. Thank you, Ms. Marquez, for joining us this morning. We'll turn it to you for your opening statement, and then, as you know, we'll have some questions for you. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll be interested to hear what you have to say.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? Yeah? Okay, great. So good afternoon. My name is Sophia Marquez, and thank you so much for the opportunity to provide me some opening remarks before addressing your questions. As members of the committee know, I'm appearing before you today after being issued a summons on Monday, February 22nd. Before the summons was issued, I respectfully declined 2 invitations by written correspondence through council. My refusal may have left the committee members or other Canadians with the impression that I am a reluctant witness or that I represent We Charity in an attempt to refuse the committee's questions into the organization activities. Let me correct that misconception at this time. I'm happily appearing before you as a private citizen to answer your questions honestly and to the best of my ability. I'm very proud of the way I've conducted myself throughout my professional career, and I have nothing to hide. I would like to share for the record some background about my role at We Charity and the limitations on my ability to assist this committee in its study. Prior to working for We Charity, I obtained a Master's in Public and International Affairs in 2014 from the University of Ottawa. After graduation, I worked in policy analysis, project management, and proposal development roles in both the nonprofit and private sector. I have never been a consultant lobbyist or worked in a role where lobbying formed the core of my responsibilities within an organization. I began my employment with We Charity in July of 2017 as an associate director of strategy. In this role, I managed a team that supported the efforts of other departments and the executives in the development of specialized proposals across all sectors. This included the private, public, and nonprofit. I wasn't initially hired to be a liaison for government or other stakeholders. In July of 2018, We Charity recognized that my work had gradually and naturally evolved to focus more on external engagement. And I took on the newly created title of Director of Government and Stakeholder Relations, along with a shift in my duties. In this role, I was responsible for engagement with all levels of government, as well as strategic stakeholders across nonprofit sector and private sector in relation to domestic programs ran by We Charity in Canada. This including securing funding, project management to support the successful implementation of funded programs, and fulfilling reporting requirements on existing initiatives. All of this work was focused on helping to advance opportunities for Canadian youth to engage in service and education, a goal which I cared passionately about then, and I still do today. The scope of my responsibilities did not include, however, the stewardship of donations or management of specific donor relationships, the securing and management of talent for We Day or ancillary events around it, or any involvement in We Charity's international projects. I also don't have information on We Charity's corporate or financial operational structure. To be clear, if you're imagining me as a full-time in-house lobbyist, that would be a mischaracterization of my role. I wore many hats, and lobbying was occasionally one of them. My government engagement at all levels included all kinds of activities and communications, including overseeing project management, reporting on existing government-funded programs, or even understanding, broadly speaking, youth policies that were in place. I was not by any stretch a full-time lobbyist or even a regular lobbyist for the federal government. I am aware of the Lobbying Act and Code, and I was aware of them while working for We Charity. As members of the committee will know, the responsibility for registration for in-house lobbyists under the Lobbying Act lies with the executive director of an organization. In support of We Charity's response, however, to the lobbying commissioner's inquiries and other requests from the federal government, I provided all my calendar and records to my former employer to facilitate an estimate of my actual time spent engaging with the federal government in any capacity. I am aware that We Charity has completed a registration under the Act dated back to January 2019, which includes my name as an in-house lobbyist during my employment with the organization. I was not involved in that process, which took place after my departure from We Charity, and I cannot offer the committee any information about it. I can tell you that I can, of course, tell you what I remember about my role in developing the proposal of the Canada Student Service Grant in April and May of 2020, as I already did for the Finance Committee back in August. I can only do this, however, from memory, since my records belong to my former employer. I can tell you that before the Canada Student Service Grant was conceived, We Charity made an unsolicited proposal to government for student entrepreneurship program, which we hoped would be a way to support Canadian youth during and after the first wave of the pandemic. This proposal was made to Minister Ng and Minister Chagger, shared with Minister Ng and Minister Chagger in the first half of April 2020. This proposal was in no way related to what eventually became the Canada Student Service Grant and focused on a different type of youth engagement from a scale perspective and model perspective. I can also tell you that I was aware that Rachel Wernick contacted Craig Kilberger and identified the government's interest in developing a student service program on a much wider scale on April 19th. In response to that information, I was deeply engaged and dedicated most of my time to mobilizing my colleagues at We Charity to draft a proposal for ESDC, which ultimately provided to government as a formal proposal on April 22nd. The service proposal was shared widely with government after April 22nd, as I understand it, though I would have no knowledge of internal communications within government. To confirm, I did participate in a briefing call with Craig Kilberger, Michelle Kovacevic, and Rachel Wernick on April 24th as well, as the record has shown. After this point, I received and responded to many requests from ESDC for further information between May 8th and May 22nd as part of the proposal development process. As of May 22nd, however, I was no longer involved in any activity regarding the Canada Student Service Grant. All responsibility for dealing with the proposal or agreement negotiations were led by the executive level within We Charity, and I had no further involvement in or knowledge of engagement with government at this point. My role as Director of Government Stakeholder Relations at We Charity ended on July 31st, as you all know, of last year, and I have moved on in my own career from that work. I remain committed to promoting youth education and engagement in Canada. And I'm very proud of the hard work that our team did to advance these issues at We Charity, particularly during a pandemic. It has been truly disappointing for me to watch those efforts be undermined and ultimately undone over the past several months. I welcome the opportunity to answer any questions the committee may have for me at this time.
Thank you for that statement. Mr. Barrett, we'll turn to you for the first round of questions.
Thanks very much, Ms. Marquez. Thanks for joining us today. My first question is with respect to contact between you and the lobbying commissioner. Have you been directly contacted by the federal lobbying commissioner? And if so, what was the nature of that communication?
No, I have not been contacted.
Have you been contacted by the RCMP regarding lobbying activity at the We organization?
No, I have not been contacted by the RCMP at this time.
Are you aware of any contact by the RCMP with your now former colleagues at the We organization with respect to the Canada Student Service Grant proposal or other iterations of that proposal in 2020?
I have no direct knowledge of that at all.
Okay. Are you able to share with us how many meetings with ministers, staff at the We organization had monthly, in 2019? And my question is going to follow up how that contrasts with 2020.
So my understanding is that We Charity has been tasked and already registered for lobbying and has a detailed record of all the meetings of these interactions for myself as well as other colleagues. I don't have that at hand. And as I mentioned in my opening statement, the information I provided at the time when I left the organization.
And so have you reviewed the publicly available findings or the publicly available records with the lobbying commissioner provided by the WE organization? Have you had the opportunity to take a look at those?
So in preparation for this meeting, I took a look at publicly available information and included the registry for the lobbying for We Charity. And it does reflect, to the best of my ability and memory, the meetings that I held with different government officials or public officials, whichever those were. But I don't have the details at hand with me right now.
Okay, so it's your assessment based on your recollection that that reported information is accurate.
Correct. As I mentioned before leaving the organization in July 31st, 2020, I went through my records, my calendar, my activities, everything that had to do with overarching my engagement with all levels of government, as well as other stakeholders, and my former employer would have this detailed information.
So, considering your knowledge of that information that you reviewed in preparation for attending today, and I appreciate you taking the time to do that. It makes this exchange easier. Would you say that of those people and of those interactions that it would add up to, and you having knowledge of the Federal Lobbying Act and the requirements for organizations to comply with it, would you say that that adds up to a significant portion of one person's duties at the WE organization?
So, based on my review of publicly available information, and based on my knowledge, as part of my tenure as Director of Government Stakeholder Relations, I wouldn't be able to assess and give you that answer as I didn't have a purview or full understanding of other people's work and time.
And who would you say the principal individual was that did the most lobbying or interacting or advocacy with the federal government by the WE organization? Having said that, it was not yourself.
I would not be in a position to be able to assess that, as I didn't have access or purview to the number of hours that other employees or my previous colleagues would have spent within what would be considered lobbying activities.
Okay. Did you have any communication with the now former Finance Minister Bill Morneau's office regarding the $3 million grant that the WE organization received just prior to the federal election in 2019?
Sorry to interrupt you. Would you mind repeating that? It cut off a little bit.
Yeah, no problem at all. So in 2019, the WE organization received a $3 million grant from the Government of Canada. Did you have any communication with former Finance Minister Bill Morneau's office regarding that agreement?
Thank you for your question. So from what I can remember, I was part of the We Charity team that engaged with different agencies at the federal government, which would have included the Ministry of Finance as well and their staff, in order to ensure there was alignment in policy objectives as well.
And do you recall who your point of contact would have been for the team at the Ministry of Finance?
I can't seem to recall for that specific contract.
Okay. Did you or are you aware of contact between the WE organization and the Government of Canada with respect to the Canada 150 activities that the WE organization participated in on Parliament Hill?
So as I stated in my opening statement, I started with We Charity in 2017, and I believe the Canada 150 event was prior to my starting date at WE, so I would have no direct knowledge or involvement with that contract per se either.
Ms. Marquez, I think that's my time. Thanks very much for answering my questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll turn to Mr. Fergus now for your first round of questions.
Tout d'abord, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Marquez. Madam Marquez, I want to thank you for your comments at the beginning of your presentation. You know, it's not always that the committee require that a witness appear before us, but we found that necessary because you refused on 2 occasions. It's unfortunate that it got to this point for us to make it obligatory, but I thank you for appearing before us today. Ms. Marquez, could you tell the committee if there's any information that you can share with us today which has not yet been shared with other committees that you appeared before in the House of Commons in the past?
Thank you for your acknowledgement at the beginning of your question. Since my appearance the first time around before Parliament in August of last year to this point, I have no direct knowledge of any information that has come up where I would be helpful in providing even additional information. What I've testified before Parliament last year and today, it's my recollection and to the best of my ability and memory, what I went through and how I experienced having worked for We Charity. So no other comment.
Rien de neuf. Rien.
So nothing new. Nothing new to add to your testimony.
So the only thing that I can provide you is what I already stated in my opening statement. The scope of my job, as I described it, was very well defined, and anything new that would have come up through any other means, I have no direct knowledge or additional information to provide to this committee, unfortunately, as much as I would like to be helpful.
Pouvez-vous
Ms. Marquez, could you explain why you believe that you were summoned here today?
Sorry, can you repeat that question again?
pouvez-vous
Could you please tell us the reasons for which you believe we summoned you to appear before this committee today?
So I believe as a former member of We Charity and acknowledging the title of Director of Government Stakeholder Relations that I held, and the obvious communications where I was involved during the Canada Student Service Grant program, I was deeply involved in those conversations, and to me that's evident that you may have interest in understanding my involvement, and I'm here to answer any questions that you may have about that particular project.
Merci.
Thank you for your answer. Listen. Mr. Paul Mutter appeared from Speaker's Spotlight a few months ago, and he explained how his life had been deeply affected by all the media attention surrounding his company, considering the ties with We Charity. And certainly, he believed that and this is somewhat in quotes, he felt that he was somewhat abused by the questions that the opposition asked him in public. Could you tell us if you had a similar experience, or could you please share with us your experience, considering that you are someone now who's been thrust into the spotlight, the public spotlight?
Thank you for your question. I can't speak to any other individual's experience. It's a very personal comment to be brought to light, but I can speak to, as it pertains to my involvement and how I feel around being brought to this committee or any other committee to bring forward my perspective and part in all that had to do with the Canada Student Service Grant. I'm happy to provide any information possible. And at no time I've felt that any MP or anybody has harassed me or any type of qualification of that sort.
Bon, j'ai pas pensé qu'il va.
I wasn't thinking that any MP harassed you. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
But I misheard
Ouais.
from the translation. My bad if that was the case.
Non,
Thank you so much, Mr. Fergus. We'll turn to Madame Gaudreau now for your first round of questions.
Oui, merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. For you, Ms. Marquez, I will try to speak slowly, even though my minutes matter. I want to thank you for being here today. I was present at the Finance Committee, and I have a few issues I want to reconfirm with you. To allow us shed light on the matter, I know you also have some research to make, following, for example, your telephone calls. When I look at my notes, I have a few questions for you concerning the 20th of April. You indicated on the 13th of August that you had to make some verifications. There was no call on the 20th of April when you looked at your record. Was that information validated? Because that is a decisive date as far as we are concerned.
Et le 20 avril.
And the 20th of April had to do with the ministry, the Department of Employment and Finance.
From what I can best recall, I can't seem to recall that there is a specific meeting on the 20th that I can confirm. If you have that information at hand or an email, or can share that, perhaps I can shed some light into what I can remember, but I don't seem to recall that.
OK.
Very well. We'll proceed with questions. On the 5th of May, you were in touch with the Prime Minister's office with Ms. Lebel and Mr. Tees during a telephone conversation that lasted 30 minutes. Could you confirm that information?
What I can confirm is that I was only on a phone call with Mr. Tees. I can't recall the other person's name, as I haven't met that person, as a matter of fact.
OK.
Very well. And a few minutes ago, when you were asked whether you had been in touch with the staff of Mr. Monod's office since the 1st of March, you said you had been in touch with Mr. Ahmed Sen and Michelle Kovacevic. Is that correct?
That is correct.
OK.
Very well. I have a broader question. As Director of Government and Stakeholder Relations, with all due respect, with all the expertise that you had, I have a question. Is it normal for me to wonder about the vigilance we must exercise to be as transparent and neutral as possible. I mean, make sure that since lobbying was not your main task, I would like to have an idea of the percentage of lobbying tasks that you carried out. But am I the one who is being too vigilant? But is it a process that should have been done by you to make sure that you should not be here today?
Thank you for your question. So to answer your question, the only way to truly estimate how much time I spent on activities, which would then also be classified under the Lobbying Act, I would have to reconstruct my activities based on my calendar. And as I stated before, that information is with my previous employer. But if you're asking about my estimation, I would say that I would have not ever exceeded more than 20% of my time at any point in time. And during some periods, it would be as little as 5% as it pertains to specifically the federal government. I would like to.
Et pour vous, parce que.
And for you, because I know that Mr. Chair, we have to wait for translation and I'm losing time. Even though it could have been 20% or 5%, in your opinion, even though it's not a high percentage, would it have been normal to make sure that you had your records declared to make sure that you were transparent in all your communications and meetings?
As I mentioned, my role evolved naturally as I was doing it, and through that natural job transition, I wasn't as I wouldn't have tracked specifically and thoroughly. In hindsight, I would see how that could have been helpful. But as I mentioned, at the end of my tenure in July of last year, I did provide all of my activities and the time spent on lobbying and in general in other activities to my employer, and they would have been tasked and responsible to submit and register for lobbying as they have already.
Thank you, Madame Boudreau.
And they did not do that.
Sorry, is that a question that the?
Oui, c'était ma dernière question.
That was my last question. Yes or no? You were not recorded. The time wasn't recorded.
I wouldn't be able to assess and say whether We Charity recorded or not my time. I provided all the information to We Charity, and that should be appropriately reflected in the lobbying registration, to my understanding.
Thank you. We'll turn to Mr. Angus now for your first round.
Merci.
Thank you.
Madame Marquez, for participating in these discussions. And I think I just want to say very clearly that, us issuing a summons for you, this is not about us saying that you have broken any laws or done anything wrong. You worked for an organization, you worked under an organization that had the duty, the obligation to follow the Lobbying Act. Our questions for you are very much about just clarifying some issues so we can get a better picture. So I thank you very much for coming today. I'm looking at when the moment that the We Group did register to lobby was after questions became very public about whether or not it had engaged in illegal lobbying by not registering. It lists, I think, 65 meetings and engagements with government during that time when you were the Director of Government Relations. And there's a number of people involved in that. So it seems that it was a busy enough portfolio. I note that prior to the pandemic, the group was looking to hire a manager of government relations. So you would have been Director of Government Relations. They were looking to hire a manager of government relations. Would that person have worked under you or Craig and Mark Kielburger or both?
That is correct. That person would have worked under me.
So we would have had a director and a manager, which, again, to me suggests that this was a pretty serious part of the operation. But what I notice is that the meeting, none of the contacts with Ministers Qualtrough or Chagger to confirm their participation in the We Day events is in the lobbying, nor any of the events that Mr. Morneau engaged with the Kielburger Group. That's not registered under the Lobbying Act. Was that your responsibility to reach out to public officials like Minister Chagger when she was going to be asked to be a We Day participant? Was that you, or is that Mark Kielburger's responsibility?
Thank you for your question. I wouldn't be tasked to draft nor send out official invitations for We Days directly. That would have come either from either one of the co-founders, Mark or Craig Kielburger.
Right. So perhaps, because I know that Mark and Craig had chiefs of staff paid for by the We charity that were paid over $100,000 a year, would have been, say, Mark's chief of staff who would have reached out, because not just an invitation to We Day, but they would have had to arrange, for Minister Chagger to be there, Minister Qualtrough to be there. That would have been done under Mark's, my understanding, if I can correct me if I'm wrong, that would have been under Mark's purview.
That could have been under Mark's or Craig's purview, to my understanding.
Thank you for that. Yeah, because neither of them are registered to lobby, but I think that's, again, part of the issue that we're dealing with here. On April 9th, Craig Kielburger reached out directly to Minister Morneau on the $12 million youth entrepreneurship grant that you talked about. Hey, Bill, I hope this finds you, Nancy, Henry, Claire, Edward, and Grace enjoying some well-deserved downtime at Easter. And that was the beginning of the discussion of the $12 million grant. So would that have been common for Craig to have reached out himself when you were actually the director of government relations? Wouldn't it have been you to reach out to Minister Morneau first?
Thank you for your question. I don't have a recollection of me being part of that conversation. Can you confirm whether that was only solely sent by Craig, or was I involved?
Well, this is what we're trying to figure out, is that Craig sent it to Minister Morneau, and 11 days later, Minister Morneau is signing off on it, which strikes me as an extremely quick turnaround time. So in that 11 days between Craig sending a request for $12 million and it being mentioned in the April 22nd announcement and Minister Morneau verbally signing off, were you involved in those discussions?
I was not involved nor aware that that Minister Morneau had approved for that proposal to move forward. And if I wasn't part of the email you're mentioning, then I probably wasn't in the loop of that specific item.
Okay, so then when he speaks, Minister Morneau speaks to Craig on this, and Craig had confirmed that they had talked about this entrepreneurship, I think on April 26th, so you wouldn't have been part of that either.
Sorry, are you referring to the April
26th phone call between Craig Kielburger and Minister Bill Morneau? They talked. Craig had said that they discussed the entrepreneurship grant. So would that? So this whole moving of the $12 million, which is listed as the 900 plus 12, it's the $912 million that they announced. Would that have all been Craig handling that himself, and not you as the Director of Government Relations?
So the call that you were specifically alluding to, I was not part of.
Okay.
Okay, that's what
I just have to move on. April 17th meeting with Minister Chagger and Craig Kielburger. You were at that meeting, correct?
I was.
Okay, because in your email of April 20th, and this is what my colleague, Madame Goudreau, was referring to, that you state that Minister Chagger said we include a service component and suggested we consider opening a service stream. This is so to switch the entrepreneurship grant into what became the Canada Summer Student Service Grant. So she mentioned that separate service stream in that meeting you were at, correct?
I don't recall the minister mentioning anything specific to the Canada Student Service Grant at that call.
Been created, but I'm just going to quote you said, Minister Chagger expressed interest in exploring ways to adapt the entrepreneurship proposal we submitted to Minister Ning and include a service component to it. She suggested we should consider opening a service stream. So that's your words from April 20th. And then on April 22nd, Craig Kielburger repeats the same thing that this, so I'm believing this comes from your notes. So she did talk about this service stream being opened through working with you guys?
So for what I recall from that meeting with Minister Chagger was within the mandate of her office, she was tasked to oversee and ensure that the Canada Service Corps program, which has nothing to do with the Canada Student Service Grant, which later became a program or didn't. That program was something that we were deeply interested in better understanding and supporting the federal government in scaling. And so as such,
sorry, just because I'm running out of time here. Because you met her about the entrepreneurship grant, you said
correct.
that she suggested adding this service stream. That's what it says. And then Craig says the same thing on April 22nd. So did she talk about adding a service stream as you state in your notes?
Ms. Marquez, I'll get you to answer that question, then we'll turn over to Mr. Carey.
So I can't recall word for word what Minister Chagger spoke about the service piece, but I do remember it was mainly focused on the social entrepreneurship proposal that we had at hand.
So she suggested we should consider opening a service stream and include a service component. So that becomes the Canada Summer Student Service Grant. Thank you for that.
Mr. Carey, we'll turn to you now for your next round of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Marquez, for being here today. I wanted to ask you, have you had any contact between any members of the government or any representatives of We Charity between your two appearances at committee, between the one you were at before and the one today?
So I've been in contact with previous We Charity employees as I built a number of meaningful relationships with previous colleagues. And so I would say, broadly speaking, yes.
Do you have anybody at the government?
At the government, I haven't engaged with public officials or elected officials at all.
And would you feel comfortable sharing the names of people that you were in contact with at We Charity?
I find it unnecessary to name all my personal friends in public at this point in time, if that's okay.
No, that's fair. I did want to get back to a few things. You were Director of Government and Stakeholder Relationships from January 2018 to July 2020. And in that role, was avoiding conflicts of interest and potential appearances of conflicts of interest a part of your duty? Yes or no?
No.
Really? Okay. Was it your responsibility to communicate with members of the cabinet to help benefit We Charity?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
In your role as Director of Government and Stakeholder Relations,
correct,
would you say it was your responsibility to communicate with members of the cabinet to help benefit We Charity? Yes or no?
Yes.
It is, yeah. So I want to get back to a question my colleague asked you about the $3 million grant from the Canadian government just before the 2019 election. And did you or any of your colleagues communicate with former Finance Minister Bill Morneau's office in regards to that $3 million grant?
I can't recall specifics, but I wouldn't be surprised if that would have been the case at some point.
Well,
we would have to check the records.
I would appreciate firm clarification on that, because at that time, Minister Morneau, I don't know if you were aware, but he had an outstanding $41,366 still owed in unreimbursed travel expenses for his 2017 trips to Kenya and Ecuador for We Charity, which the organization had paid for. Now, is that something you would have been aware of at the time?
As I mentioned in my opening statement, the scope of the job that I had did not include the stewardship of donations or the management of donor engagement directly for international projects or any of that. I had no knowledge of that happening.
Well, Ms. Marquez, I hope you don't mind, but that just makes absolutely no sense to me that the Director of Government and Stakeholder Relations wouldn't be aware of the unreimbursed expenses before receiving a $3 million grant. We Charity was clearly organized. So the only explanation I could have for that is you weren't told because of incompetence within the organization or because of willful ignorance. And the appearance of this is horrible. Mr. Morneau, $41,000 is a lot of money. I would say most Canadians would agree that's a lot of money. And this could be perceived as an attempted bribe or one of those oversights which would affect his decisions. And what was it in your organization? Was it that somebody was incompetent and not informing you of this extremely important reimbursement that wasn't done? Or do you think it was willful that they didn't tell you this?
What I can bring to this committee is the confirmation that I had no direct knowledge of any payments or outstanding payments that any minister or donor would have or would have not done at any point of time. The scope of my responsibility did not include that. And as such, my due diligence did not include engaging other departments to ensure that was the case or not. And so,
well, unfortunately, my time's up, I think, Madame Marquez, but thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Carey. We'll turn to Mr. Sobero now for his next round of questions.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, Mr. Marquez. Thank you for your testimony today. I just wanted to figure out if I can just go over a few facts with you. How long was your employment at We Charities?
In total, I worked for We Charity for about 3 years.
And when you began your career there, at what level or what was your definitional role within the organization?
When I first started at We Charity in 2017, my role was an associate director for strategy.
Associate director for strategy. And what were the 2 or 3 largest items that are 2 or 3 responsibilities that consumed your time in that role?
In that role, I would be overseeing the preparation of specialized proposals for governments, for nonprofits, as well as for donors. And I oversaw a team as well.
And how large was the team?
It varied depending on the point in time, but as small as 4 people and as big as 9 people.
Okay. And then how did your role evolve during your 3-year period there?
So given my background, academic background on policy, social policy, and having worked for other nonprofits in the past or prior to having started We Charity, it became evident that I was very helpful in crafting proposals, specialized proposals, and identifying good avenues for We Charity to advance important youth programs across Canada. And so as such, eventually my role evolved to include a bit more engagement, forefront engagement with individuals instead of just simply focusing on the creation of documentation and proposals as such.
And you mentioned 2 words, social policy. Can you just tell the committee members what is your background if you're interested in social policy? Obviously, social justice is very important in ensuring an inclusive society. But can you describe your background in terms of social policy, please?
Yeah, of course. So I did a bachelor's in international relations, and I also did a master's in public policy and international relations. Within that, I focused almost exclusively in youth education and equity in access to services so that society at large wouldn't be discriminated against. And to be completely frank, social policy programs are at the heart of what I do, and it's what's driven me to work for the nonprofit sector.
Okay. And you do also understand that why you're here at the committee today. You get why you've been called here, and to be frank, obviously I would have not. I wish the scenario was that we didn't have to issue a summons, and we could have heard this testimony at a different time, because I think what you're providing, because even with one of my colleagues questioning today, you weren't even in the emails that were mentioned. You were not in that loop at all in those discussions. If I'm correct, I just want to make sure we're getting the facts, or to your understanding, your time there, the 3 years there, that you weren't in the loop on a lot of the contacts that were being that occurred.
If I can answer your question very directly, there were some initiatives and some engagements where I wasn't part of the conversation, and sometimes the executives would lead those conversations, and sometimes I would.
Okay. And was the organizational structure at WE, because every organization has their own corporate structure, own culture, own brand, how would you describe that organizational structure? Because it seems like WE was headed by two very strong individuals, if I can use that term, two founders, and entrepreneurs tend to lead in that manner. How would you describe the organizational structure at WE?
I believe We Charity had a very strong executive team that oversaw a very large organization. The co-founder's role was one that became truly inspiring, to be completely frank, as to many of us as employees. And the board of directors always had, to my understanding, an involvement in every single decision and program that came in hand.
Okay. And what is your, fast forward to today, end of February 2021, nearabouts, what's your current engagement with the co-founders of We Charity?
So after the end of my position as Director of Government and Stakeholder Relations at WE on July 31st, I have not talked to either one of them.
Okay. And I do want to ask a somewhat pointed question, because it was raised today. We just heard some of my honorable colleagues characterize some of your past work as a bribe. Do you agree, Ms. Marquez, with that characterization?
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Point of order, recognize Mr. Carey.
That, to be very clear, I did not say it was characterized as a bribe. What I did say quite clearly is the fact that the Minister of Finance still owed over $41,000 to We Charity.
I think that this is probably
perceived.
Thank you.
As a bribe.
Thank you, gentlemen. I don't think that that's a point of order, but simply a matter of debate. I will now turn to Madame Goudreau for your round of questions.
Thank you, Ms. Marquez, for your testimony.
Yeah.
Merci.
Thank you. I have a few questions. I just have 2 minutes, 30 seconds. I'll speak fast. You've talked about due diligence. I understand that with your role and studies enabled you to be vigilant. I also understand that the Kielburgers helped you progress. I want to know why you were appointed Director of Government and Stakeholder Relations. Very quickly.
I had the educational background and the understanding on educational policy and youth policy that helped the organization understand how to engage best with these individuals.
So you knew about due diligence. You knew that a possibility of conflict of interest was something important for you. Did you have the opportunity to ask the Kielburgers to make sure that they were avoiding any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict of interest when there was anything like money that was not repaid, anything that could give someone an advantage later on?
I did not have a conversation with Craig Kielburger around that theme of information. No.
Est-ce que vous croyez?
Do you believe that the Kielburgers avoided giving you elements even though you were the Director of Government Relations?
I can't answer that question. Only they can answer that question.
Est-ce que vous vous
So, do you feel that you were fulfilled in your capacity as Director of Government Relations?
Fulfilled? Sorry.
est-ce que vous
Do you feel that you were rightly used in your capacity as Director of Government Relations? Valued?
With a team of incredible individuals, including the co-founders, on a number of initiatives. And what I can speak to is my willingness and ability to do my best at every time.
avez-vous eu le
Did you have the opportunity to ask those questions to make sure that we, charity, be able to avoid any conflict of interest? Did you make a request with your bosses, the Kielburger brothers, to make sure that they were respecting the right practices?
Are you referring to any specific practice? I'm sorry, it's just a very broad question.
pour s'assurer d'être
To make sure that they were on the lobbying registry, to make sure that everything was right when it came to giving money to the government?
Again, as I mentioned and explained in my opening statement, within the role I held, I believed that everything around lobbying and my activities did not reach at a point where I felt the need to bring it up several times or at all with the executives, particularly because I understood that the responsibility lied on the executive level at the organization.
Thank you, Madame Goudreau.
Je vous
We're going to turn to
remercie, Madame Marquez.
Thank you, Ms. Marquez.
we will turn to Mr. Angus now for the final questions.
Well, thank
Mr.
you,
Angus.
Madame Marquez. This has been very helpful, and I hope that your new career is very successful for you. Well, some of the reasons we had to ask these questions is because the issue here is $912 million, and whether or not that was obtained through illegal lobbying. Because the failure to register to lobby, what makes it a toxic issue is that if we can't track how people discuss and meet with government, deals can go down. And that's why I wanted to ask you that initial set of questions about the April 9th email that Craig Kielburger wrote directly to Minister Morneau to see if you were involved, and you weren't. Because we're talking about a $12 million grant that was verbally approved by the minister, and we have Craig Kielburger personally reaching out to the finance minister of a G7 country about that, and you as director of government operations or government relations was not involved at all. This was like Craig calling Bill, his bestie. You were not involved in those discussions, is that correct?
As it pertains to the email that you're alluding to, no, I was not
And the
involved
$12
in
million,
that
okay.
conversation.
Thank you. I want to go back to the April 17th meeting just to be clear, because April 22nd, I have an email from Craig Kielburger to Minister Chagger. And he says, thanks for your time on Friday. We appreciate your thoughtful offer to connect us with the relevant members of your ministry. Over the weekend, our team has been hard at work to adapt your suggestion of a second stream focused on a summer service opportunity. So would you say that that was correct, that she had suggested this second stream?
I can't recall specifically the minister saying word for word that there was a specific service stream that we should have been building.
Okay, because you have it in your email that you specifically mentions it. Craig specifically mentions it. So let's just go through the timeline. This is the reason it's so important. Friday, April 17th, you, Craig, you and Craig meet Madame Chagger, and we have you on the record and him saying she talks about the second service stream. That Sunday, Rachel Wernick contacts Craig Kielburger to discuss launching a youth service program. Monday morning, you're contacting Ritu Banjari, the executive director of the Canada Service Corps, who works for Chagger. And then there's a full briefing given to you that day by finance about what they're looking for. And by that night at midnight, you have proposed to them what becomes the Canada Service grant. And 2 days later, it's announced, the 900 plus the $12 million. That's an extraordinary turnaround time. So I need to just go back to April 17th, where you were meeting with Minister Chagger about one thing, but she talked about the separate service stream. And within a couple of days, over that weekend, you guys have got that plan. You must have been up all night on the weekend getting that service component together, n'est-ce pas?
Thank you so much for bringing that up. I want to make very clear that following April 19th, of Rachel Wernick's calling Craig Kielburger to discuss broad parameters of the Canada Student, what would become the Canada Student Service Grant Program, that's when it really triggered us, including my particular full-time attention and work on building a proposal based on those broad policy directives. And so I think there's a number of people who've come on record to confirm that. And yes, we spend so many hours working on versions and editing of that proposal on a very short time and window.
Well, I can imagine, and I'm just going to end it here. I think that it is, and this is nothing to take away the extraordinary work you did. I mean, you turned around something huge in just a couple of days. For me, the issue is that when we asked Minister Chagger, she said she had no recollection of talking to you about the separate service stream at all on April 17th. She did not talk about that meeting, but that becomes the germinal that comes into this whole program. So I want to thank you so much for your testimony. It's been very helpful.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Angus. Thank you, Ms. Marquez. We thank you for joining us this afternoon. Colleagues, we're going to suspend the meeting for just a few minutes so that we're able to set up the next witness. So meeting suspended.
Thank you.
Back to order. Colleagues, it's our second hour of this meeting. This afternoon, we have Mr. Reid Cowan, who is a donor and fundraiser with the Wesley's Smiles Coalition with the Free the Children. I believe that was an organization that was founded by Mr. Cowan to raise funds for the Free the Children organization. Mr. Cohen, we want to thank you so much for joining us. What we'll do is we'll turn it over to you for your opening statement, after which we will definitely have some questions for you. The floor is yours.
All right. I'm here today to speak for and on behalf of this little guy right here. This is Wesley Cowan. And so when I talk today, I hope that you will receive what I have to say as a dad who's here to speak on behalf of his son. I am the proud father of Wesley Cowan, a little boy whose April 23rd, 2006 fall from a swing set claimed his life and thrust those of us who love him into a years-long effort to turn pain into purpose by building schools in Kenya on the assurances of Dalal Al-Wahidi, Craig Kilberger, Mark Kilberger, and Roxanne Kilberger that those schools that we built, that we engaged donors to help us build would be named after him, would have his name on plaques on each school to give Wesley a legacy and to serve the children in Kenya. Now, I know that all of you got up this morning and you likely prepared for this hearing going through routine and procedure, but I want to assert to you something that routine and procedure are really never a good way to understanding what I hope to convey in this hearing. And that is this, that learning that We Charities and Free the Children are embroiled in scandal and that assurances made to donors are now in question feels like to me returning to my son's grave to find it broken open, defiled, and empty. It feels like the place that you thought was safe and secure for the body of your child has somehow been made unsafe, not secure, and standing there, you don't know exactly how it happened. You don't know exactly who did it, but you know something is not right. That sense of safety and security and solace is damaged and the damage is done. That's how it feels to be here today. I want to let you know with respect to your process, I really didn't want to be here for this hearing this morning, but from my perspective, when members of parliament request your truth, you have to oblige. I also right off the top want to say in fairness to Craig Kilberger and Robin Wistawati and board member David Stillman with Free the Children and We Charities, that they indeed have blown up my phone and emails and text messages and voicemails and phone calls after I gave Craig hell over what the Bloomberg article claimed about Free the Children and We Charity and staff telling the reporters that there was often jokes that plaques should be made of Velcro because they were so often swapped out on schools that donors thought that they had built once the donors had left. I also want to say and acknowledge here, because I know media is watching, that I've had a lot of media inquiries, and for very good reasons I've held back wanting to go on the record about this. You know, I'm a member of the press myself. I don't want to do this. I don't like the amount of press that could likely come by a U.S. donor who is connected, as I am, to a presumption of millions of dollars raised, all tied back to my son and our efforts. And I have not wanted to participate in the process of selling papers or helping bloggers get web clicks for outlets or boosting ratings on the back of my beautiful son. I want to be clear about something. Wesley's name, Wesley's face, Wesley's life of 4 years and his legacy were used to make money for Free the Children and We Charities. And somehow letting media outlets make money using the same has felt painful and just too much. Before I answer your questions, I ask each of you that I can see on this screen and those that I can't to search your souls in this moment, because frankly, I don't know who the bad guys are. If there are any of you in this meeting who are seeking to use Wesley's face or name or life or legacy as a political card to play in something other than finding truth on behalf of donors, I, with respect, ask that you call off my portion of the hearing now. So that said, to frame your understanding briefly, I formed the Wesley Smiles Coalition fundraiser in the days after we left Wesley inside of his mausoleum. Our group has paid Free the Children. We paid Free the Children and We Charities out of our own pockets, none of us with a great deal of money, to travel to Kenya 3 times. We were given unlimited access to Kenya operations and staff for interviews, for documentary crews that I paid for and hired. In Salt Lake City, I believe in 2006, our efforts raised just short of $100,000. In Florida, when I partnered with one of the largest school districts in the United States of America, our fundraising brought in more than $100,000. as I believe and have been told. And I'm also aware that over the years, large checks have come in to Free the Children and We Charities via my speaking around the United States, people who saw my TED Talk, and all in, I believe that I am connected to what I presume are millions of dollars raised. In fact, as We Charities board member or Free the Children board member, David Stillman told me on a phone call recently, quote, "Because you did this for your son, Reed, people saw that. That got groups like Welders, like Walgreens, like Unilever, like Allstate to join. So many people went over who told us, wow, if one guy did this for his son, what can we do for our company? And they adopted villages because of you," close quote. So I want you to know something, because I believe in seeing facts on paper, and I've tried to get some of the facts on paper. I've repeatedly asked for an accounting of all monies raised connected to Wesley Cowan's legacy, and as of this date, I have not been provided that accounting. I'd like it. I've repeatedly asked for an accounting of how much money our group and our groups paid to Free the Children and We to travel to Kenya to stay in their facilities and be on their program. And so far, I have not been provided with that accounting. And as a result of the scandal, to my great mortification, I have had to contact members of the Broward School District in Florida and those who led our Salt Lake City, Utah efforts to tell them about the reports, about my discovery, and their horrible phone calls to have to make. Now, also to the bloggers and tweeters who are out there watching right now, I saw your tweets this morning. I want you to know something clearly. I'm not in a campaign against the Kilburgers or their organization. I do not wish them harm. I do not wish their families harm. I do not wish to harm any of the good work that may have been done. And very clearly, I am not, as board member David Stillman said to me on a well-transcribed phone call, out to harm the legacy of his late brother Howie, whose name is on some of the schools in Kenya. What I am doing is speaking for a child who cannot speak for himself. I'm here as Wesley Cowan's father to guard his legacy, and I want to know why his legacy feels robbed. Finally, before I take your questions, and I know eyeballs are on this, I have a request for the rich and the powerful and the well-connected, the celebrity and the corporate set who lent their power to the elevation of Free the Children and We Charities. I'm asking that you come out of hiding on this matter and go on the record, as I have had to do today. Come out to vouch for Free the Children and We Charities and Mark and Craig Kilburger. Come out to open all of your records and all of your communications with them, and let people like me and other donors know that you believe Free the Children and We Charities are indeed on the up and up. Prove it. Prove it with your brand and your big names. Let kids in Canada and kids in the United States know it and be done with this. And with respect, that means you, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and your family. That means every corporation that engaged with Free the Children, Walgreens and others. That means Oprah Winfrey and the members of the Oprah Angel Network and affiliates. That means pop star Demi Lovato, Nelly Furtado, Madonna, who sent her daughter Lourdes. That means Prince Harry. That means the Dalai Lama. That means Mia Farrow. That means Nate Berkus. That means Malala, and any other big name whose profile and credibility and power brought Free the Children and We Charities to being that mega $1 million powerhouse on the backs of children and on the back of my late son. And I'm asking all of you that I named and anybody out there who might fall in those categories to do it within 7 days. Because hear me now, none of you have lost anything. I lost a child. And here I am in front of the camera, not wanting to be here. By stepping forward and telling the world that you vouch for Craig and Mark and We Charities and Free the Children, you've lost nothing. And this is an opportunity now, when the spotlight is on this issue, for anyone who is involved with them to use their truth and their light and their power for advocacy, if there is any to be had. And if you don't, your silence says everything. And people like me, people like my donors, and legacies like Wesley Cowan's and Howie Stillman's and countless others hang in the balance. People like me who stand feeling like the graves of their children have been robbed. I appreciate you hearing me, and I am ready to take your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Cowan, for your testimony and your opening statement. Mr. Barrett, we'll turn to you for the first round of questions.
Well, Mr. Cowan, thank you for joining us today and for your very powerful opening remarks. I want to start by offering you my sincere sympathies on the loss of your son, Wesley, 15 years ago. And I want to thank you for using the 15 years since to build something in your son's name, a legacy in his name. And I can't imagine the difficulty with which you had to undertake that, and the daily reminders of the loss of your son, but to do it, to turn it into such a legacy for your son. And I want to say his name again, because this is, you know, the transcripts of this committee will be preserved in perpetuity, and your son, Wesley Cowan. And that's really, so thank you, sir. I'm wondering if you can tell us, with respect to the Bloomberg article that you referenced, and the comment made by staff, the reported comment about donor plaques ought to be made of Velcro. How does that relate to your fundraising efforts in your son Wesley's name for a school in Kenya?
Well, that was the starting point to doing a lot of investigation on my part. Forgive me. Of all that I read in the Bloomberg article, that was the most important touch point for me to investigate. And I received, not long after the article, photos that were taken, I presume within recent months, of every door on every school at every campus in Kenya. And I noticed that the door to the school building that we had opened on the 1-year anniversary of Wesley's tragedy, because we made a goal. We said on the 1-year anniversary of, I still can't say the D word, on the 1-year anniversary of what happened to Wesley, we'll be in Kenya and we'll be opening a school. So after I read the Bloomberg article and acquired photos of every door of every school, of every campus in Kenya, I saw that the school that we had opened and put our plaque on with Wesley's name and his motto, which I wear on the bracelet. We gave thousands of these bracelets away, be happy every day, was no longer on his school. And instead it had the name Esther Grodnick, and then in smaller font, the Howie Stillman Foundation. So I thought, well, who's Esther Grodnick? And who's the Howie Stillman Foundation? And I went to the foundation's website. I don't know if their videos are still up, but I followed the link to videos and I saw a video. I have it. It may have been taken down now, but there was a timestamp for an opening celebration where they opened the very same building less than 2 weeks before we arrived there. And you know, we went to Kenya thinking we were opening that building for Wesley, but their video with the timestamp on it, and I've matched it frame for frame because I have extensive documentary footage, shows that suggests damningly that what the Stillmans celebrated in their video was the one that just, you know, I think 13 days later, we opened. The ceremony was recued for us, same people and same songs, same everything. Different plaques. Pretty devastating. As I told Craig Kilberger, you know, you mentioned 15 years, but I have PTSD and I still walk these floors at night. And on the hardest nights, I close my eyes and I go back to a Nelarai campus and that school building that we opened, believing that was Wesley's campus and that the sun was coming up in Kenya, and that kids were in his desks, and that gets me through lots of nights. So you can imagine when I see the timestamp on the Howie Stillman Foundation's building that bore the name of Esther Grodnick on the building that we thought our plaque was on, it raised a lot of questions and felt pretty damn devastating.
Thank you, sir. Chair, how much time do I have?
You do have 2.5 minutes.
Thanks.
Sorry.
No, that's I appreciate your answer, sir. So you mentioned that you've spoken with Mr. Craig Kielberger in the since you've made this discovery. Would you be able to share with us Mr. Kielburger's explanation or his comments on your finding?
So I sent Craig an email after this discovery and let him have it pretty good, and told him that I had pretty clear, solid, clear-cut evidence. He responded a couple of times by email, and I felt kind of like a little bit of a defensive tone in the emails. He then passed me off to board member David Stillman. That conversation, I still feel, went down in flames. So then Craig called me. Craig has repeatedly engaged me to try to talk to me. And finally, I agreed to a phone call, and we talked, I think, for about 2 hours. The explanation that Craig gave me, to the best of my memory, and I can go back and look at the notes of the conversation, was that there was a little bit of a mea culpa. He explained, you have to know that when we went there, we were told by Roxanne Kielburger, over there is Dr. Atkins' school, and over there is the Oprah Angel Network library, and Wesley School is going to be right between those. And so the explanation Craig gave me, again, to the best of my memory, I'd want to go back to the notes to be specific, was that at some point, the Stillman Foundation wanted to come in and adopt an LRI campus, lock, stock, and barrel. And that that they reached out to members of the Oprah Angel Network. They reached out to Oprah. They reached out to the Atkins family. They got their permission to take their plaques down so that the Stillman plaques could go back up, but they failed to reach out to me to ask for my permission. And he apologized for that.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. We'll turn to Ms. Latanzio now for your round of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First things first, Mr. Cowan, thank you so much for being with us today. I too want to offer my condolences for the tragic loss of your son, and I want to talk about maybe more the great advocacy and fundraising work that you've done since to honor his memory. So, can you tell us a little bit more about Wesley and how you came to the decision that it was time to turn your grief into action? Let's hear you on that.
Thank you. And this is out there in my TED Talk, so I'll be brief. In the days after we lost Wesley, we saw Craig Kielburger on the Oprah Winfrey Show. It was at a time when I was being monitored. Nobody would leave me because they were afraid I'd harm myself, frankly. And my partner, Gregory, said to me, you know, we can do something with this, and we can give Wesley a legacy, and we can help these kids, and let's get in touch with Free the Children. So very quickly, we called Dalal Al-Wahidi at Free the Children. And I explained to her that I'd been on TV in Salt Lake for 7 years, that I had launched the Power Tour with Governor and Mrs. Huntsman, Governor and Mrs. Huntsman, former ambassadors to China, former ambassadors to Russia, son of billionaire Huntsman Chemical founder, John Huntsman Sr., and they quickly latched on to helping me build the Wesley Smiles Coalition fundraiser. Dalal said, don't do a 501c3, just you can become a fundraiser. We'll track every donation. We'll always track every donation that comes in under Wesley's name, and have them just send the checks to us. Craig Kielburger told me he canceled a trip with President Bill Clinton, and instead diverted himself to Salt Lake City for the first fundraiser, where we raised quite a bit of money. And I think the rest is in my opening statement. In interest in condensing time, it continued.
Okay. And going and continuing in that realm, how did your involvement in the Smiles Coalition and Free the Children, what did that mean for you, and how has it helped you get through your grief?
Well, kind of like I said, it gave me the enormous blessing of engaging angels in my communities that I served as a journalist, to know that people are good. And when the chips are down, people forget differences of religion and politics and sexuality and all of that, and they just see a father who's hurting. And it meant so much to me to see that so many people wanted to be engaged in a good cause in the name of a little boy who will not get to grow up, get the scholarship letter, run the ball, get married, etc. when we went to Kenya and we opened the school that later I saw in the Stillman Foundation, actually they had opened 13 days before, it gave me a place to say, okay. In fact, I said in the opening of the school, in giving you this school, I am giving you my son. So,
yeah,
I don't know what more I need to say about that.
I hear you. Would you recommend to others, Mr. Cowan, now that they should contribute to international charitable organizations, if they're looking for ways to get more involved, would you recommend that today in 2021?
Would I recommend We Charities and Free the Children?
That people contribute to international charitable organization if they're looking for ways to help. Would you recommend that to people as a way of?
You know, that's the sad thing about this for me and all the kids who sat in those stadium events. Do you feel burned enough that you never give again? Do you feel burned enough that you just distrust activities overseas and across borders and just get involved in your own community? I know for me personally, I will serve the communities I live in, and I won't engage across borders because now I feel burned. I don't know. Like I said in my opening statement, I don't know who the bad guys are. And in the absence of that, people's time and assets and advocacy are too sacred to roll the dice.
What would you say was the most fulfilling part of your work to honor your son's memory?
That I get to have conversations with him at night when my eyes are closed, and I get to say, you can see me, but you can also see the kids in Kenya, and send them a little rain and send them a little sunshine, and maybe help the one who feels bullied at the back of the classroom to feel confident, and maybe save a life. But the most fulfilling is I gave my child a legacy. At least I thought I did.
I'm sure you did. Would you say that you coming before us today has a purpose, has served a purpose?
I have fulfilled the obligations of the request to be here. And I hope that others who donated, who are in power to clear things up, will see a father who did not want to be here. You know, my son's birthday is coming up, and 6 weeks after that is the day he left us. And this is a dark time of year for me anyway. So if I had to be here, then the people who are in power, like I said in my opening statement, should be here, and I hope they will.
Thank you, Ms. Latanzio. We'll turn to Madame Gaudreau now for your rounds of questions.
Bonjour, Monsieur.
Good afternoon, Mr. Cowan. You have a lot of courage, and that's worthy to be mentioned. I have a few questions for you to add to what I've just learned. I'm shocked. It's disturbing, and it's very disturbing for the future. First of all, I would like to know, did you envision the 46th episode of Fifth Estate, the report by Price Paid? Did you watch that episode? Yes. I would like you to comment what you experienced and what you found in the report, and then I'll have other questions for you.
Thank you for the question. I'm a journalist, so obviously I look at how stories are laid out and how stories are told. I felt like it was a softball. I felt like it gave viewers no sense of how much money has been raised last year, the year before, or in the last 10 or 15 years. I think viewers need to know the magnitude of money that was raised, and I didn't get that in the report. The part that hurt me the very most was, I believe, between the 20 and 30-minute mark that talked about the water treatment facility that groups thought they had built. Another group thought they had built, similar to how I felt about the buildings in Kenya that I don't know if we built.
Merci.
Thank you. Maybe during the interpretation I missed something. Do you have contracts? Did you have any contracts when you talked about your process during this moment of generosity, great generosity?
If the question is, did I have any contracts, signed agreements, written agreements, then the answer is no.
Okay.
Very well. Do you believe that if at the time when charity organizations are gaining ground, we see that there's sometimes loss of control, and I always like to have my perspective as a lawmaker. What can be done to prevent or punish? Do you believe that there's a role we can play to particularly make sure that maybe we, in terms of financial aid, do you believe that elected officials have important work to do when dealing with organizations of such magnitude?
I'm a big believer in transparency, line by line transparency, line by line accounting. When the money came in, what the money was intended to do, and what agreements were tied to the money that came in, and whether those agreements were met. It's just a matter of good faith, right? And so I don't know Canadian law. I don't know your processes and procedures, but if they do not exist to mandate line by line accountability, not only how much came in, how much went out, does what exists in the world match the magnitude of the funds that came in, right? Are the buildings that are on the ground, does it match the money? If you don't have laws and procedures for that, then I hope you do someday.
Bien, sachez, Monsieur Cohen.
Mr. Cohen, you should know that in terms of due diligence, conflict of interest, that is what we are doing, because clearly there are loopholes. And I would like you to know to what extent it is important. In my opinion, and I hope it's the same for everyone, we need to find all necessary means to make sure that there's no one else like you having to go through this impasse that is unacceptable. Public funds must be well known, and we need to know what is being done so that you can regain trust. Humanity is us. And if we want to maintain generosity and solidarity, I believe that your testimony is very relevant beyond the partisanry we may see in a government where you have 300 and something people. It's sometimes difficult to have the impact we want as quickly as possible, but I want to thank you profoundly for your testimony. But I want you to know that we are going to work on it to correct the situation. That is why we are taking all this time now to shed light on the millions of dollars of our money, as we've realized, was used, and we are still waiting for the report. So, Mr. Cohen, I want to thank you. And if there's anything, any documents, any written agreements, any written document that could help us more understand your testimony, we'll appreciate having it later on. No further questions for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madame Gaudreau. We're going to turn to Mr. Angus now. Mr. Angus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Cowan, for coming forward. You know, again, I think all of us are pretty shaken up, especially, you know, as a father, as someone who wants young people to believe and to make change, and the incredible energy that you tapped into. We have to honor that. and I thank you for your testimony. I also recognize that you are an Emmy Award winning journalist, so you're probably not used to having to answer questions. You're more comfortable asking the questions, so you'll have to bear with us for a minute. I want to go to Mr. Kielburger's response to you that this was a mistake. It is possible that a mistake was made, that, in their excitement of getting more funds in, they forgot to contact you. But what concerns me was we saw the Bloomberg article where they talked about Velcro plaques, that this was a tactic. And staff seemed to think that it was kind of funny. That was shocking. And then we had the Fifth Estate article that said, a documentary that said that this was being done with the water wells, a same kind of tactic of having multiple donors pay for the same water hole. We've had staff at WE tell us stuff was going on in the schools, but you have confirmed this. This looks to me like a pattern of duplicitous relations with donors. When you see this pattern laid out, how do you feel that this organization can carry on doing this kind of work?
I have to be honest with you. When I left my conversation with Craig Kielburger, until hearing from all of you to appear, I had become confused enough that I just wanted to put it away, to be honest. So that said, to answer your question, if there is a pattern of duplicitous relations with donors, as I feel there is, at least from my comparing the Stillman Foundation work and video with mine, how do I feel about it? I feel like my son was the victim of fraud.
So you spoke, David Stillman was sort of your contact person of trying to talk you through this when you raised these concerns. You dealt with Craig, but you also talked to David Stillman. What did David Stillman have to say to you?
I think David Stillman, board member Stillman, left the conversation feeling like we left with kind of amicably. Your pizza's ready. I feel like he felt like we left amicably, but I felt like the conversation was engaging with kind of like a dog barking at the mouth of a dark cave. Couldn't get a word in edgewise, and that dog didn't want me to go in the cave and turn on the lights. I left disturbed. I left disturbed because I felt like what was said on the phone call and the well-documented exchange was directly contradicted by an email that followed the next day. Just to kind of characterize why I felt like I was talking to somebody who I didn't feel like I trusted. He said to me, and he's on their board, he said to me, and I will take out the full use of the profanity, but he said, would I ever work again with Craig Kielburger? No. Would I ever want to work with Mark Kielburger again? No. But I'm here to protect my brother's legacy and to protect the work in Kenya, and that's what I'm doing. So the next day I followed up with an email saying, it's my understanding from our conversation, there's no love lost between you and the Kielburger brothers. So if your goal is to, as being a board member, protect the legacy of your brother and protect the work in Kenya, as you said, put me on the board. Put me on the board and let me have a say, because I'm invested. And he responded back and said, and I'm paraphrasing here, oh, no, I love Craig and Mark. And didn't seem really excited about the idea of me being a decision maker on the board. So when somebody verbally says something and then the next day it contradicts directly, trust is lost.
I ask this because when this scandal began to break in Canada, the Stillman Foundation stepped up big time. They paid for supposedly independent audits, saying that everything was perfect at the Kielburgers operation, although we don't seem to have anything on what happened internationally. It was all seems to be very, we get a small picture and that picture tells us everything's fine. But the Stillmans took out full-page ads in Canadian newspapers, which isn't cheap. I'm just surprised that they were then the point person having a school named after their family that was your family school, and they were dealing with you. In your talks with Mr. Stillman, did he raise any concerns about whether or not money had been moved around inappropriately? They told, in their ads, they said everything was done fine. There's nothing to worry about. Was that the message he gave to you?
He insisted nothing is there. You can do all you want. You can be ugly. He used the word ugly. And again, I had a hard time getting a word in edgewise. I felt like I had to repeat myself over and over. I felt like I was on the defense. So, you know, can you repeat the question? I'm sorry. Did I feel like he had any concern about money? He just kept insisting there's nothing there. There's nothing there. You're not going to find it. Craig and Mark Kilberger are done. They're done. Nobody will answer their phone calls. They're done. So what are you even doing here? This is just ugly. You're just ruining your son's legacy. You're ruining my brother's legacy.
But he took out the full page ads. That's what I'm just trying to clarify, is that in response to our investigation, the Stillman family took out full page ads. They paid for independent audits. So I'm just wondering if he said he had any concerns about money not being there or should be there.
No. I mean, I said to him, if I showed you proof, would you believe me? And he said, nope. Wouldn't believe you. Wouldn't believe you if you even showed me proof.
Okay. Thank you.
And it makes sense that they would take full page ads out. They have a whole campus at an LRI with all of their names on it. They have a lot to defend here. They're just choosing to defend it one way. I'm choosing to defend my son's legacy in another.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. We're going to turn to Monsieur Gourde for 5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen, for your testimony. Very touching. I also want to extend my sincere condolences to you. I'm also disturbed by your testimony because I believe your trust was abused. This makes me sad. People like you are very important in our society. I spent a lot of energy and money. You spent a lot of energy and time in the memory of your son, and hopefully it also helped many other children. I dare hope that all the money you collected and also spent from your own pocket could have given hope and a better life for other children. Things that unfortunately you were not able to share with your own child. Do you have any advice for us or advice to give future donors on how to choose? What is unfortunate with all this is that we need people like you doing this kind of work, making such donations. Unfortunately, when people like you are exploited, they lose trust. Many people who want to make donations, millions of people who want to donate to good causes, lose trust because they wonder whether their money will be used correctly. So maybe we would like some advice from you. Advice for people who still want to make such donations.
You know, I don't feel like I have any advice that could be of use. I felt like I vetted the charity. I mean, when Craig Kilberger appears on the Oprah Winfrey Show, you feel like the charity's been vetted, right? When Craig Kilberger and Mark Kilberger and Roxanne are mixing with the Prime Minister of Canada to a royal in the UK, to the Dalai Lama and Malala, you feel like the charity is on the up and up, which is why I said in my opening statement, then all these people should come forward and say it, right? So I don't have any advice. What I would say that going forward, I'm going to look at the needs of my neighbor across the street and next to me and in my community, because I see my neighbor every day and I can track what any generosity I extend does in my own community. I wish this hadn't happened to me, to where even vetting somebody through the cachet of Oprah Winfrey and all of the big names I mentioned is not a barrier enough to insulate from scrutiny and scandal. That's sad.
Well, de ma part, j'ai pas.
I don't have much else to say. I hope that this experience and the request you've made asking other people to come testify will be respected so that you can find some peace of mind in the future. Thank you.
Merci.
Mr. Sobera, we'll turn to you. Thank you, Mr. Gourde.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, Reid. Welcome this Friday afternoon. Thank you for availing yourself and joining us. I don't really consider myself to be philosophical in any sense of the way. I just try to be I'm just a grunt. I'm just a grit. I'm in hockey. There was a former ice hockey player named John Tonelli who was on the New York Islanders. He was just one of these grinders out, and kind of that was his success. You work hard, you play by the rules, and you get some balls bounced for your way, and you do what you do in life, and you just be good. And I believe in karma and so forth, and just make your way in this world and do what you can and contribute in all levels. And I view life as being one long continuum, and you never know where it's going to go, not with breaks, but with a continuum. And we each all have a chosen path, and your path is, from what I've read today, has been very interesting. Obviously heartbreaking to a certain extent. Absolutely. I'm a parent of two young daughters. So, I can only imagine. And so my heartfelt condolences to you and your family and what you've gone through. But I am also here to learn and learn about a witness like yourself comes to this committee. And I just really, you got into charity or helping kids because you wanted to do this, and this meant a lot to you. So I'm really going to ask you like a sort of a broad question. Where are you today? Where were you when you were doing these initiatives, and where do you want to go forward in helping kids? And I excuse me for making it so broad, but listening to the testimony, and I'll stop here and turn over the rest of the time to you. I just have a lot of questions, but I just want to ask one big, broad question, and I'm going to turn the floor over to you. Thank you for coming, Reid.
Where was I? It was near death, quite literally. Through the process of serving the amazing people of Kenya, and through the process of working to give my son a legacy, I found a modicum of healing, and it gave me rungs on a ladder to hang on to when I feel like I'm falling. Where I'd like to go, I would like to, if it worked for my professional life, to have a part and a say in all of the monies that I hope are somewhere earmarked for Kenya through Free the Children. Like I asked, I would like to make sure that I'm a servant of that legacy once the house is cleaned and the money changers are thrown out of the temple, so to speak.
Okay. Okay. Those comments are quite strong. When you were involved, how many children were being assisted in Kenya? If I can get just some of the details out, some of the broad strokes, and was this your idea entirely to go to that specific country? If you can provide some details there, Reid.
No, I mean it was a joint venture with the hearts that beat under my roof. But I only know what I saw on our trips to Kenya by way of numbers and how many children were served. And oftentimes those numbers and narratives were shaped by what Free the Children told us. So when I characterize it for you, no, what I say to you is what I was told. But I was told that in excess of 400 to 500 kids per campus benefited from an education, clean drinking water, alternative sources of income, places for their cattle to graze, et cetera. And that each campus served that.
And then if this is going to be even tough for myself to even ask, in memory of your son Wesley, you took on your shoulders these initiatives plus many others. And how fulfilling was this for you to do? And obviously there's an air of, from what I sense, disappointment now. But obviously an air of that you want this to still go forward in terms of assisting other children, specifically in Kenya.
Well, it was healing, and it was fulfilling, and it was life-changing. And it was so huge that now to feel like maybe the magnitude of what I advocated for and accomplished and did wasn't reflected in Kenya is just as devastating, right? So, think of those of you who are parents, what it was like to hold your child for the first time. How do you say how fulfilling that was? It just defies words. So I have held Kenya and the people of Kenya and the kids who go to Wesley schools in my heart with that kind of wonder that defies words.
Okay. I'm just going to close there. I think my time is running out here in a second. I called you Reed. I do want to apologize. I don't know you personally, but I feel like
no, you're fine.
Feel like it's from Mr. Cohen. But again, my heartfelt condolences. But I also want to wish you as much success and health and productivity in the remainder of your journey in this life. I look at it as a continuum. So if we ever do cross paths, I hope it's in a different venue and a different format. But again, I thank you for coming here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll turn to Madame Goudreau now for the next round of questions.
Merci, Monsieur le.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Cohen, a while ago, I said to what extent I found you courageous. I hope that in this entire process, all these would help you overcome somewhat. I really understood the issues you dealt with all your good faith and trust that you had. And I understand to what extent our work entails making sure that everything is done properly with transparency. That is why in the next few weeks and next few months, I would like us to keep in touch, to show you what we've been able to do to make sure that the money helping these organizations to step up and have great impact, just like what you experienced. While waiting for that, you have a very strong and important voice today. What would you like to share with people like you? Who are working like other donors like you, other parents like you. What would you like to tell these people who are now concerned and feeling somewhat frustrated? What message do you have for them? Before I end, I also wish you courage.
Thank you. So I would like to talk to those who trusted me on behalf of Wesley Smiles Coalition. I'll speak to those donors, right? All of the kids. I would say to them that they have every right to seek answers and transparency and accountability of Free the Children and We Charities. They have every right to do as I have done, to ask for documentation, to ask for an accounting. And I would say that in the absence of that, to remember that the spirit of Kenya can be shared in our own communities in the absence of answers, in the absence of transparency. But to those who donated because they trusted me and they saw my son's picture, I will tell them that I'm also here for them today, because I hope that your process gets all of the answers, and I hope to engage those who are in power, who are way more powerful than me, who are way more quote unquote important in the world than I am, that they'll come forward and end this once and for all. Just come forward. Let's see everything. Let's see all the documents. Let's see everything, so that people can go back to trusting and get to work. Because in Kenya, the need is great. The need is great. And especially during and post-pandemic, the need is going to be even greater.
Thank you. Thank you, Madame Goudreau.
Merci, Monsieur Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen.
We'll turn to Mr. Angus now.
Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for this. This is going to give us a lot to think about this weekend. I just want to speak to the issue where you said it feels like fraud. Under charity laws that I've been looking into, it's possible. For example, I supported a foster child many years ago, and we got her picture and we got her story, but we knew that we weren't actually paying for that one child. We were paying for the village. We were paying for development projects. That's very clear in how, in the small print. So charities do make announcements of a specific thing, but then the money's spread over other needs. But what concerns me is that you went to raise money for this school. You brought a lot of people to the table, and they showed you. They said, this is your son's school. That seems to me a verbal contract. The fact that, did you say 3 weeks before, or 13 weeks before, they had given that school to the Stillman family? What was the difference between when you were told that was the school you'd built and the other family was told this school was built for them?
A couple of points. When Craig Kilberger came to Salt Lake, he told all of our donors during a well-televised fundraising that they would be building schools, and that for every $10,000 and $12,000 raised, a school would be built. Right? So they were told, this is what it costs to build a school, and you are going to build a school brick by brick.
Yeah,
it's part of their branding. When Mark Kilberger came and spoke to all the huge group of Broward school students, you are building schools. $10,000 to $12,000 builds a school. So donors think, okay, if we raised 100,000 here, 120,000 here, you do the math, and you think on the ground there should be brick by brick, right? A brick is a physical object that actually takes form to build a school. You think it'll be there. I am beholden to the people I engage that those schools should be there, right? Now, I have on video many Free the Children staffers saying, this is Wesley's school, this school. So why, in recent weeks and months, was that school photographed as bearing the plaque of Esther Grodnick with the Howie Stillman Foundation? Why?
Right, so you can't verify then all the schools that were built. That's the question.
Can't.
Okay.
I can't verify that the promises that were given for every $10,000 to $12,000 that you help us raise brick by brick, you will build a school in Kenya. Well, do the math. Do the math.
Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that, because I guess it's this issue of that you were invited, your family was there. This was on the first anniversary after your son's passing. They opened the school and said, this is your school. To me, that sounds very much like a verbal contract, a commitment. You can walk away, and then from that, you walk away back to the United States, or fly away back to the United States, and start to fundraise more. You were a big fundraiser for the WE organization, were you not? And it was based on that verbal commitment that this was the school for your son. And look, you've seen it with your own eyes. You brought television crews, you documented it. This was the school. Did that not give you sort of the energy and the drive to go and help bring more people, more corporations, more people into the WE organization in the United States?
Without question, the documentary that I did, I literally have Roxanne Kilberger saying, this is Wesley's school. And then I say, when you give money to an organization, a continent away, you wonder if it's real. And then I put my hands on the brick, and it is. It's in a movie. I got it.
Well, thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. We'll turn to Mr. Carey now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Cowan, if my voice is shaking a little bit, I really am struggling a little bit on what to say. I've been a member of Parliament for 17 years, and I don't think I've been moved more from somebody's opening of their heart to a committee before. And all I can say is that I feel extreme sadness for what has happened to you. I want to thank you for your courage and leadership. I'm a new member to this committee, and what you've done today for me, I want you to know this, that you've really explained the importance of the work that we're doing here, following up on making sure that the legacy of your son, Wesley, is properly looked after. What saddens me most is when you have somebody such as yourself who is a victim of fraud, the effect that it has on good people. Because with the goodness that you wanted to put out into the world, you were able to bring in other people who wanted to do good, who wanted to spend their time, who wanted to make a difference. And we need more good people in the world, and we need more good people to do things and take action. So I want to thank you for that. I don't have a lot of questions, but I was wondering, because I'm really starting to feel the effect that this horrible situation is going to not only have on yourself, but a lot of people that have been connected to this charity. Could you explain to people watching today why it is so important that we do a good job to find, you said earlier on, you don't know who the bad guys are. We don't know who all the bad guys are either. We're starting to see a picture and a pattern being formed here. But why is it so important that we do find the bad guys in order to restore trust? Because we need more things, like you were saying, transparency and trust in the system, because the good work that you have shown a record that you can do, we need that into the future.
So if my understanding of the holdings of Free the Children and We Charities is correct, it's huge, a lot of money. And I see this as an opportunity, once things are cleaned by the refiner's fire, to make sure that those monies go. Speaking to the importance, there are kids in Kenya right now who have something to teach us, who are wonderful, who are rich in spirit but poor in access to all of the things that Craig and Mark Kilberger have advocated they get on microphones. And so it's a great opportunity, if you all do your job right, to make sure that all of the holdings are accounted for and earmarked, and that all of the agreements that have been made are honored, and that the money that was made, that was not mentioned in the documentary that was referenced today, is reflected on what's on the ground in Kenya. And I don't believe it's there. When you pull the finances and you pull the disclosures, I don't see what could be accomplished with the force of that money. And I'd love to see it accomplished.
Yeah, well, I think all of us would. And I don't think I have a lot of time, but I just wanted to say, sir, it's been an honor to have you in front of us here today. I know it was extremely difficult, but thank you. And we will do our best to come to the bottom of this.
Thank you, Mr. Carey. We'll turn to Mr. Fergus if Mr. Fergus has some final questions.
Oui, merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Cowan, for appearing before us today. Your testimony was very touching. It deeply touched many of our members. My question is a simple one. You said that you still want to make a difference in Africa, in Kenya. But because of your experience with We Charity, I would like to know if you have any advice to give people listening to us today, people who, like you, want to do good, want to make a difference for people who are less fortunate than us. What advice can you give those people so they do not find themselves in a similar situation?
In addition to what I've already said, I'll just tell you a quick story. There is a Maasai warrior who I met on our trips named Wilson. And Wilson taught me that first step every morning in warming up charity and kindness that can spread out to changing and saving lives was doing this. Jambo, Rafiki, Jambo. And I joked back with him, you know what we would call that, Wilson? The gym culture in the United States would call that your kindness calisthenics. So what advice would I have for my donors and all of the kids that you see in the We Day videos who are out and excited to do good for others, in the absence from answers while you all do your work to find out who the bad guys are, if they are bad guys, to not forget this, Jambo Rafiki, and to do your kindness calisthenics, because this translates to this, translates to this. And those out there who start here, go here, and then project it outward to the world can honor not only my son, but the beautiful kids who I have for years felt like his legacy served.
Mr. Cowan.
Mr. Cowan, I sincerely hope that the memory of your son can comfort you. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Fergus. Mr. Cowan, thank you so much for coming to our committee today. I thank you for your testimony and your moving testimony that revealed your heart and betrayal. And so, as a father, I can only imagine the pain that you have endured and then continue to endure over the last number of weeks. On behalf of all of us, we thank you for your testimony. Colleagues, I will suspend the meeting now for just a couple of minutes. We'll thank our witness, Mr. Cowan. We'll let you leave, and then we will have just a couple of things that we need to discuss with regards to committee business. We'll suspend now. Meeting suspended. We need to discuss. We are still in public, and so this is not an in-camera discussion. I just wanted to remind colleagues of that. There's 2 points. Firstly, Mr. Victor Lee has agreed to our arrangement with regards to the questions that we will submit to him. He will supply us with an opening statement, and so there's a couple of things with regards to how we would do this. My view would be is that we would wait for his opening statement to be provided to us, and then we would supply him with the questions. The questions would then be able to reflect the statement that he made, or if there's issues that he brings up. But 2 points would be if that's the appropriate arrangement, and then secondly, if in fact that if we agree that that should be the arrangement, then we'd ask we have to ask him to supply that at a specific time. And so I guess we're just looking for the deadline with regards to those questions to be advanced to Mr. Lee.
Point of order.
Yes, Mr. Angus.
Sorry, I can't. I try putting my hand up, but I don't have that little electronic thing. So I'm. Just 2 things on this issue. I would rather just get the questions to him. I feel we really need to get this study done. Like this is carrying on and on and on. We could end up with another month or so of playing tag with him. I'm sure his opening statement's great. I have a number of specific questions, and I think some of what Mr. Cowan raised in terms of finances and getting a picture, I would prefer to get my questions in and have them answered so that we can actually move on. Then we get a statement, and then we can decide whether we're going to have him come in person or not. But I would like to get the questions in soon, and I would like to have a bit of a deadline so we can get them back, because the clock's ticking on this study.
Yeah, so I'm seeing some nodding heads. There seems to be agreement with that arrangement. We'll turn to Ms. I guess so. The next point would be is when we would make the deadline for questions to be submitted to him, if that is the agreement. Mr. Barrett, we'll turn to you.
Yep. So I would say soonest for questions to be submitted to him. I think that because we want those replies soonest. So today being the 26th of February, I think that questions should be transmitted to him or to his representative by a week from today, and latest. And so I guess if I'm saying latest, then that day. And then I think somewhere 2 weeks or less for a reply. You know, to Mr. Angus's point about the length of the study, we're going to hear from witnesses on the 8th, and so ideally we can wrap this up in March if possible. That way we'll have his replies before the end of March, and then we can make a determination if we do in fact need to hear from him in person in April, and perhaps we don't need to do that following his replies.
Thank you. Madame Goudreau, we'll turn to you.
Oui, en fait.
Yes. Considering Kielburger's appearance on the 8th of March, we are almost ready to provide questions to Mr. Lee, considering that Mr. Lee was aware, so he probably has his documents ready. I believe a week at the most for us to send him our questions. I would even propose not more than a week. The Kielburgers will come on Monday. A few days later, I believe Mr. Lee should give us the documents a few days after the appearance of the Kielburgers to allow us quickly know whether we need to have him in committee. So I think that we are running out of time and things are not moving fast. We've been very patient and indulgent, but we need to conclude. I think that's the way we should proceed. Thank you.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is a growing consensus to have the questions submitted to the clerk to be submitted to Mr. Lee's representative for March the 5th, and a response from him by March the 12th. Is that Mr. Dong? We'll turn to you.
Yeah, I concur with Madame Goudreau's point, and I was now I hear the chair presenting a specific date questions on the 5th, response by the you say the 12th?
I said the 12th. Seeing some heads nodding, but
response by the 12th. Okay, yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay, so that looks like I'm getting some thumbs up and some heads nodding, so that's very helpful in terms of that. Yes. Charlie, Mr. Angus.
Thank you. I think it's just very important that we stress whether it's done through an affidavit or just a recognition that these answers have to be as if they were under oath. We need to make sure that, you know, Mr. Lee is answering. We know he's under medical leave, he's under stress, but we need that these answers have to be his answers, and they have to be the absolute truth.
Yeah, absolutely. We will make sure that it is communicated that these would be as if they were presented in live committee, and so all of the requirements for testimony before a committee in person would be the same for this arrangement as well. Mr. Barrett.
And just on that point, Chair, members not having the opportunity to ask for the witness to be sworn in, we're taking an extraordinary step in allowing this witness to provide written responses instead of attending committee after multiple invitations. And so I would ask if there was a consensus to explore, through the clerk, what we could do, and whether that is to have an affidavit sworn out, or I'm not sure. Have an affidavit, or have it sworn out in front of his lawyer and have it stamped accordingly. He's working through counsel, but I do think that there needs to be the full force of it being under oath, because we're giving the gentleman, whereas all of our other witnesses have to provide answers off the cuff. These are going to be prepared answers with a week to respond instead of a second to provide a contemporaneous answer to questions that are being asked. So I do think that just beyond the regular step, I would say that we need to do something that is equal to asking them to swear an oath.
We will look into that. I will task the clerk to work with me to see what arrangement could be established. But at least at the bare minimum, we will ensure that it is communicated that this is as if it would be before a parliamentary committee, and all of the requirements and the repercussions of not being truthful would be intact in the same way that one would when they are presenting before a committee in live person. Second of all, colleagues, we do have a question from the Kielburgers' lawyer with regards to their testimony or their appearance that's upcoming. They have asked that we allow for them to bring an additional witness. Her name is Carol Mora, and she is director of We Villages in Kenya. She's the senior manager of Free the Children Kenya, and they are asking that she appears with them on March the 8th. I'm interested in your perspectives, colleagues, and would be interested in what your response would like, how you would like me to respond to that request.
So, just Chair, does that mean that Mr. Spencer Elms, the director of many of their operations in Kenya, has not responded to?
That is correct.
Okay, so. I don't know if it's necessary, and again, I'm just saying that I think I was sort of hoping to get a key financial director, because again, given the bombshell that we heard today, and the fact that the main financial director is off sick, that one of the other key directors of their corporations in Kenya doesn't give us answers. Maybe we just need to focus on the two Mr. Kielburgers, but that's just my initial gut reaction. I'm open up to my colleagues.
Mr. Barrett, I'll recognize your hands up.
So we're providing maximum latitude to the witnesses, appearing essentially at a date of their choosing many months after our initial request. We have requested, first a response from Mr. Spencer Elms, and we haven't heard that, and in lieu of that, we're being offered to hear from a witness on the same panel as them, who we haven't asked to hear from, and so I think that the committee expressed a specific desire to hear from certain people associated with this organization, including both Gentleman Kielburger as well as Mr. Lee, Ms. Marquez, and Mr. Spencer Elms. And so this addition of another person, I just wonder if they can, if this other individual whom we have requested their appearance, if they can encourage their employee to make themselves available to at least do the courtesy of a response to the committee clerk. And perhaps a second panel can be convened with the two employees, so we can have the founders, and then we could have a panel with the individual that they suggest and the other individual whom hasn't seen fit to respond to a parliamentary committee, the clerk of a parliamentary committee that is asking for a response, which I take great exception to.
Madame Goudreau, we'll turn to you.
I have a concern. I've heard your comments. Are we minimizing the time we would like to spend with the Kielburgers for their testimony? I would like us to maintain the time estimate we initially reserved for the Kielburgers, and maybe we can add. That's my concern. So if we want to put everything together, I do not agree. If we want to add time so we have other witnesses, I totally agree.
Okay, I see a consensus developing here. We'll turn to Mr. Dong now.
And then me?
Oh, and then Mr. Angus. Yeah.
Sorry about that, Chair.
Mr. Dong.
Yeah, I think after today's testimony, I noticed that the testimony raised a lot of eyebrows and interest in what's really happening with the operation in Kenya. I think it would be fair to hear more testimony and giving different perspectives, I suppose, on what's happening there. But I also agree with Madame Goudreau's comment that this shouldn't be a tactic to minimize the chance of questioning the Kielburger brothers. So I would suggest to prescribe a specific time for the presentation from the staff that oversees the operation in Kenya.
Mr. Angus.
Thank you. I agree certainly totally with Madame Goudreau in order that we have the time with the Kielburgers so that we can get answers. I would go back to what Mr. Barrett suggested, if I understood him correctly, that if Mr. Spencer Elms is willing to testify, then we have the person that the Kielburgers have suggested testify, and they can testify together. I'd be very, very uncomfortable having their major director of their Kenyan operations not answer any questions, go to ground, and then someone else that we've never asked for, we've never heard of, is put forward and said, "Oh, talk to this person." I feel that it feels to me like we're being manipulated here. If they are not willing to have Mr. Spencer Elms, who's a key partner, who is the secretary of their schools, who's helps all their corporate structure, if he's not willing to testify, then I say thanks, but no thanks for anyone else. If he's willing to testify, then they can bring someone else with them. And I think we should be very clear that we're not going to be played here by them choosing who we get to hear from as witnesses.
Mr. Erskine-Smith.
Yeah, just to follow on that, I'm reasonably comfortable with the idea that if Spencer Elms comes, we can say, which was in the purview of the original sort of understanding of the study, that the new witness would go alongside Spencer Elms. I would say, though, if Spencer Elms is refused in some way and hasn't gone back to us, and I don't know what the status of all that is, that I personally have no issue with this witness providing a statement in advance, not taking any time at committee, and being alongside the Kielburgers for our committee, so long as there's an understanding that she does not answer, or whoever it is does not answer, unless called upon by one of us specifically to answer one of our questions. Like I take no personal issue with that, so long as everyone's sort of on the same page here. They're not spending any time that would otherwise be spent by a member wanting to ask questions of the Kielburgers.
Sorry, colleagues. Ms. Latanzio, we'll turn to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question in terms of, I hear colleagues around the table saying, we're going to work with, having possibly this other person from Kenya come later on if we deem it necessary. And I just wanted to ask committee members how this functions in terms of jurisdiction. I mean, can we compel someone that's out of country, out of Canada, to come and testify in this committee? And I just want to have clarification. Maybe it's because I'm a rookie here. I'm a new member, new MP, and I probably haven't learned all the functionings as of yet. But I just want to understand this. Can we actually compel someone that's not Canadian or out of Canadian? And I know we've had Americans come here to testify, but that's on their own willingness. So can we, Mr. Chairman, have the answer to that and clarification as to whether this committee has the power to compel a non-Canadian to come and testify before this committee?
Yeah, I'm happy to provide clarification. We are not allowed to, we don't have the power to compel somebody who is not on Canadian soil, but I don't know that anybody was suggesting that we that we do that in this case. I think that there was a suggestion that we request that individual. I think there was a consensus that we'd simply put forward another request. I've now heard what is clearly the consensus, which is that this additional individual should not be testifying at the same time that the Kielburgers. As it was suggested by Mr. Erskine-Smith, if the member that they have suggested wanted to, supply us with a brief, that would be something that would be extended to anybody who would want to supply something to our committee. And so she is well within her rights to do that. And so if that would be something, and if that satisfied committee members, then then she's well within her right to do that, and the Kielburgers can ask her to do that, and we will accept that as we would from anybody else. We'll leave it to committee members to determine additional witnesses, but I think what we got was a consensus that we wouldn't invite her for the meeting in which the Kielburgers would be testifying. And so, thank you, colleagues. I think that covers everything that I needed to know for this meeting. And if there's nothing further, colleagues, I will adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
Not seeing anything. Meeting adjourned.